Alrighty guys, so right off the bat here, let's go through some conference call highlights. These were Elon Musk. This is what he said. He said some meaningful things here, okay? Part one. First thing, he said no EV company is even profitable and no EV division is profitable that he knows of. I thought about it, and I thought about every single company that makes EVs in North America, certainly, right? Or in Europe, couldn't think of one. Couldn't think of one. If you know of one that is profitable outside of China, let me know. And by the way, I'm not even sure many of the Chinese companies are profitable. I think a lot of those companies are losing a fortune as well, just to be quite frank. But can you think of even one EV division or one EV company that's profitable outside of Tesla? In anywhere outside of China? I can't think of one. Not one, right? Tesla's the only one. That is special in itself. And sometimes we got to remember like how far ahead of the competition Tesla is, because I think sometimes people get confused on how far Tesla's really ahead of the competition. Like Tesla's making bank. Like we're going to go over the financials. They're making ridiculous profits, even after the crazy amount of lowering the prices they did for like almost 2 years straight. Even after that, they still are making ridiculous profits and no one else is. They're all losing a fortune. That in itself should tell you how far ahead Tesla is. They're 5-10 years ahead of the competition. Number two, record Q3 for the company, despite a tough market, Elon Musk said, and he also said they made their 7 millionth vehicle, which is very exciting, right? It won't be long before Tesla hits 10 million vehicles made ever. Third thing he said the energy business is growing like a wildfire. It is. It's absolutely incredible. That energy business doesn't get talked about a lot. We get so caught up in a Model 3, Model Y. How much did those vehicles sell this month? How much did it sell in the quarter? Okay, what's the margin on those vehicles? We get so caught up in that, we forget about the energy business, which is a slow-growing giant. I shouldn't say slow-growing. It's actually a fast-growing, becoming a giant business, right? And so that business is insane growth. We'll look at the numbers in just a moment. Fourth thing is October 10th event, he said went very smooth. They had no incidents, which I think is massive. And he said they had around 20 of the new robo cars, right? Robo taxis driving around. But additionally, they had a bunch of Model 3s and Model Ys that also had the full self-driving capabilities and had no issues. So that's great. Fifth thing is, first half of 2025, he says affordable vehicles coming out. I'll tell you what I think that affordable vehicle is going to be. There's a lot of theories about, is it a Model 3, stripped down, all those sorts of things. I'll tell you what I think it is, okay? He committed to that first half 2025. And people are like, why haven't they shown off anything yet? You know, like, why not show off anything? Well, you could cannibalize sales from Model 3 if you showed off something right now, right? You might want to show it off closer to when you're actually going into production so then you don't hurt your sales numbers. Sixth thing is, he talked about 20 to 30% vehicle growth in 2025, which is what Elon Musk is projecting, which I can tell you, that's very, very, very good numbers. Like if we hit 20 to 30%, I'm going to be very happy as a Tesla shareholder. Like, let's go, baby. That's big time. Seventh thing he said, Cybercab is going to be volume production 2026, he says. He believes they're going to make 2 to 4 million of those vehicles a year, which is an incredible number. Like, I wasn't thinking that big a production, but maybe we do go to that sort of production. But 2 to 4 million, like that's more vehicles than the whole entire company produces today. So that's to put you some thought into how big those numbers are when he's talking about 2 to 4 million of those made a year. That's an incredible number. Eighth thing is, he said the 4680 battery cell is rapidly approaching becoming the most competitive cell. He says it's close to being there. A lot of ideas on how to go well beyond that. The 4680 would be the most competitive, certainly in North America, he says. He says they are still going to buy cells from competitors. He says the company needs a lot of cells, and yeah, they do. Especially if you're talking about hitting some of these numbers that Elon Musk and the team are going for. Yeah. Number 9, he says version 13 of FSD is going out very soon. Exciting in regards to that. He talks about basically 5 to 6x less interventions versus a previous version, which I think is massive. I think that's massive. Number 10, he talks about Q2 2025. The vehicle is going to be safer than a human in terms of the driving experience, right? I think that's massive for the company as well. And keep in mind, as somebody that's experienced FSD, it's not just about being safer, because I feel like, honestly, the FSD right now might honestly be safer than a lot of humans on the road, because we know how bad drivers are. And if anything, the FSD drives like a grandma. But that's my other big point. It's not just that it's going to be safer than humans. It's got to drive a little bit more natural. And so, it has to be able to understand things quicker, make judgment calls quicker, because like I said, a lot of times when you have the FSD, it just drives like such a grandma that you're like, come on, man, can we get this thing moving a little bit? Even if you have it in assertive mode, which I'll put in assertive mode, it still kind of drives like a grandma a little bit. 11th thing he says the far majority of humans don't even realize that a Tesla can drive itself, which is crazy to think when you're so involved in the Tesla community. When you own Teslas, you don't even think about like people don't know these things can drive themselves. So, but yeah, far majority of people don't understand Teslas can drive themselves. 12th thing he said a 30-day trial is free for customers each time they do a big upgrade, which, by the way, I noticed they gave me another free trial on my Model S Plaid out of nowhere. I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, he talked about each time they have a new major upgrade, they're going to be doing a 30-day trial for free, which my opinion is he just wants to collect a lot more data. Company just wants to collect a lot more data so they can improve the software even better and better. 13, using ride hailing for Tesla employees in the Bay Area, he said, which is exciting. Right now they have to have a safety driver inside the cars, right? For regulatory reasons likely, but yeah, using ride hailing today for Tesla employees in the Bay Area, they said. 14, ride hailing, he says, is going to be in California and Texas in 2025 expected. He said maybe some other states as well. He said California regulatory side, it moves a little slower. He said Texas might move faster in regards to that, so kind of doubling down on what he said at the October 10th event. 15, Tesla will become the most valuable company in the world by a long shot. He said he kind of ended his comments in regards to that, which, is kind of him tripling down, quadrupling down, 5x downing on Tesla becoming the most valuable company in the world by a long shot, he says, right? And we'll run some projections a little later on in this video and really get to show you like what we're looking at for Tesla over the coming years as far as where this company's net income revenues are going and those sorts of things, which is going to be pretty eye-opening for a lot of folks. Hey, it's Jeremy. I hope you really enjoyed that clip here today. Listen, there are three main areas a long-term investor has to understand. You have to understand financial statements, income statements, balance sheets, cash flows. You have to understand and master portfolio management. And you have to have the ability to project what is possible for companies in the coming years. Bearish scenarios, bullish scenarios, all these skills can be learned, and that's the good news. And I'm still just a regular guy who's out here. I just have a lot of passion for the market. I've learned a lot over the last 15 years. I had a tremendous amount of success, and I have a dedication to teaching people everything I have learned in the past 15 years. If I can do it, you can do it too. You can learn all that's required to become a great investor in my private group. The application is going to be down there in the description area. You can click on that, fill out an application, join us in the private group, get access to all my best course curriculums, teaching you everything that I got in my head, and you get ability to join our 6-figure, 7-figure Hall of Fame. We have such a tremendous Discord. It is incredible. So once again, description area down there, there's a link. You can apply to join my private group in there. Now, they had some highlights here. Profitability, this is into part 2 now, talking numbers here, with some shocking numbers. Like I said, even the bears were looking at some of this and like, what? How? What? How did they do this, right? Well, I'll explain that. $2.7 billion in GAAP. This is generally accepted accounting principles. GAAP operating income in Q3. $2.2 billion in GAAP net income in Q3. $2.5 billion in non-GAAP net income in Q3. Operating cash flow of $6.3 billion in Q3? What? Free cash flow of $2.7 billion, which is a crazy number because the amount of CapEx this company's spending on is insane. We know how many NVIDIA chips they're buying. It's ridiculous, right? They increased their cash and investments by nearly $3 billion. That's insane. And that's on a quarter-over-quarter basis, by the way, right? Increased AI training compute by over 75% in the quarter. Cybertruck became the third best-selling EV in Q3 in the United States behind only Model Y and Model 3, so call them 3 for 3. Who's really running the game in the EV industry? It is Tesla. They're 3 for 3. They got the 3 best-selling EVs in the United States of America. How insane is that? And one of the reasons Rivian's starting to struggle bad is because Cybertruck's come online. And I knew that was going to be a problem for Rivian. As soon as that Cybertruck got out there, it's going to get tough. And that's exactly what we're seeing play out, right? Over 2 billion miles driven cumulative on full self-driving supervised as of Q3, with more than 50% on version 12. We delivered a strong results in Q3 with growth in vehicle deliveries both sequentially and year over year, resulting in record third quarter volumes. We also recognized our second highest quarter of regulatory credits revenue from other OEMs. That's exciting as well, right? They're making bank off all these regulatory credits from all these other companies. This is awesome. Our cost of goods sold, COGS per vehicle, came down to its lowest level ever at $35,100. In order to continue accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy, we need to make EVs affordable for everyone. Abso-dang-lutely. The energy business achieved another strong quarter with record gross margin. Additionally, the Mega Factory produced 200 megapacks in a week, and the Powerwall deployments reached a record for the second quarter in a row as we continue to ramp Powerwall 3. Despite sustained macroeconomic headwinds and others pulling back on EV investments, that's going to be a huge mistake long term. First off, these other auto manufacturers did not focus enough on EV investments for the longest time, right? Now they're pulling back on their EV investments. That's going to be a mess. We remain focused on expanding our vehicle and energy product lineup, and they have to pay the company all this EV credits, which just gives Tesla even bigger advantage. It's nuts, man. It's nuts. And others, reducing our costs, making critical investments in AI projects and production capacity. We believe these efforts will allow us to capitalize on ongoing transition in the transportation and energy sectors. Now, looking at this is kind of like a B plus kind of shrunk down income statement here. Total automotive revenues only up 2% year over year. Obviously, that's not the numbers we want to see long term from Tesla. It's very disappointing, but given how bad the business model had been in the last several quarters, we'll take 2%. Energy generation and storage revenue up 52% year over year. Services and other revenue, by the way, Tesla's going to have easy comps in 2025. Keep that in mind, easy comps in 2025. Services and other revenue was up 29% for the company. So we can see where the major growth is for this company. It's in energy generation and storage revenue, in services and other revenue. But the exciting thing is, this automotive revenues is going to start coming back to life in a major way in 2025, right? So, bam, that's exciting. Total revenues up 8% for the company year over year. Total gross profit 20% up year over year. Total GAAP gross margin up 195 basis points. What did I tell you guys? I told you back half of 2024, we're going to see margins go up, revenue go up, right? And profitability go up. And it's exactly what we're seeing play out. I nailed it to a T on this like a year ago. Exactly what I thought would play out. Oh, and I also told you back half of 2024, Cybertruck's going to get to profitability. What did they say on that conference call, right? Absolutely insane. Operating expenses down 6% year over year for the company. Income from operations up 54% for the company. I mean, at the end of the day, if your gross profit's up 20% and your operating expenses drop 6%, your income from operations is going to go to the moon. And that's exactly what happened. Income from operations up 54%. And remember, this is on a 2% up automotive revenues. Imagine if automotive revenues go 20, 30% up. What's going to happen to that income from operations? Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Operating margin was up 323 basis points. Adjusted EBITDA up 24%. Adjusted EBITDA margin up 243 basis points. Net income attributable to common shareholders on a GAAP basis, generally accepted accounting principles, up 17%. Bears love those GAAP numbers because you can't cheat those, right? Got to do it the way it's supposed to be done. 17%. What you got to say about that? EPS on a GAAP basis, up 17% on a diluted basis. These are incredible numbers, but that's just a start. This is where it gets flip your flapjacks. Insane. Net cash provided by operating activities, up 89% to $6.2 billion from $3.3 billion in the same quarter last year. CapEx, they obviously increased that massively. $3.5 billion in CapEx, which is by far and away a record. I mean, think about that. CapEx $3.5 billion? You can't outspend these guys. They're on a whole different level. Imagine trying to be any other auto manufacturer and trying to increase your CapEx $3.5 billion on a quarter in a quarter. Spending $3.5 billion CapEx in a quarter? These other guys couldn't even imagine spending money like that. That's ridiculous, right? That was up 43% on a year-over-year basis. They're spending ridiculous numbers, which is going to give them even a bigger lead over the long term, right? They won at this point. Free cash flow, $2.7 billion versus $848 million in the same quarter last year. So they increased their free cash flow 223%, despite CapEx being $3.5 billion in the quarter, by far and away a record amount. That's insane. Absolutely insane. Cash equivalents, and investments was up 29% for the company on a year-over-year basis. I mean, like I said, even if you're a bear, even if you're a short seller on the stock, even if you hate Elon Musk and hate Tesla and you don't want to see him succeed, even you have to look at these numbers and be like, damn, like that's pretty impressive. Like, oh man, they're actually, what am I going to say about that, right? Total production up 9%. That's obviously what we need to see. That's massive for the company. Now, what I thought was important here was right here. Storage deployed up 75% year over year. Tesla locations up 16%. Mobile service fleet up 5%. Supercharger stations up 20%. And supercharger connections up 22%. Tesla could start making bank off the supercharger network if these other companies could ever learn how to sell EVs. If they ever learn how to sell EVs, these other guys, Tesla's going to start making bank off superchargers because basically all these other EV makers are now all adopting Tesla's technology in relation to supercharging, and they're going to be allowed to use Tesla superchargers, right? And that's supposed to roll out in a major way in 25 and 26. But the problem is these other guys have trouble selling EVs, right? As we see, Tesla's 3 for 3, the top selling 3 EVs in North America. Hey, it's Jeremy. I hope you really enjoyed that clip here today. Listen, there are 3 main areas a long-term investor has to understand. You have to understand financial statements, income statements, balance sheets, cash flows. You have to understand and master portfolio management. And you have to have the ability to project what is possible for companies in the coming years. Bearish scenarios, bullish scenarios. All these skills can be learned, and that's the good news. And I'm still just a regular guy who's out here. I just have a lot of passion for the market. I've learned a lot over the last 15 years. I had a tremendous amount of success, and I have a dedication to teaching people everything I have learned in the past 15 years. If I can do it, you can do it too. You can learn all that's required to become a great investor in my private group. The application is going to be down there in the description area. You can click on that, fill out an application, join us in the private group, get access to all my best course curriculums, teaching you everything that I got in my head, and you get ability to join our 6-figure, 7-figure Hall of Fame. We have such a tremendous Discord. It is incredible. So once again, description area down there, there's a link. You can apply to join my private group in there. Alrighty guys, let's get in this next one.
You were at $254, you're now at $278. What was the catalyst? What did you see in here that made you want to move your price target higher?
It was a few things. First, the margins were exceptional. And if you recall, over the last several quarters, Tesla's auto gross margins have come down because they needed to cut price based on weakening global auto sales because rates went up. But now they had an incredible quarter from a margin perspective, much better than anyone thought, because the costs of production came down to levels they've never before seen. That was the first thing. The next couple things were, despite skepticism, they reaffirmed that they would be launching some lower cost models in the first half of next year. And as you played, Elon Musk said they would grow sales probably 20 to 30% next year. What that means, what's very, very important for Tesla stock, is that the revenue and earnings growth are going to reaccelerate. And if you follow the growth rates of the revenue, that stock very closely follows them. So if we see that reacceleration, which we saw since the first quarter, we're going to see Tesla stock continue to outperform.
I want to go to margin. This is a company that trades.
Yeah, and another thing is, if you're thinking about the margins and the profitability, this is very important. Everybody consider this, okay? Remember we talked about Cybertruck's going to, Cybertruck for all of 2025 is going to be a ramped vehicle. They're going to be able to put up crazy numbers in 2025. Literally as big of a number as they want to put up. If they want to produce 60,000 Cybertrucks next year, or 80,000, or 100,000, or 200,000, like whatever number they want, they can sell those, right? But the big thing to remember about Cybertruck is that was hurting margins in 2024, right? That's just starting to get to positive margins. In 2025, it's going to be a full year of positive margins and likely very positive margins for Tesla, which puts the company in an absolutely phenomenal position when it comes to their margin profile because they're going to sell a ridiculous amount of Cybertrucks next year, and the margins are going to be very good, which is going to help that bottom line, that profitability immensely as well, the earnings per share, right? So instead of Cybertruck being a drag on the business, it's going to start being a huge tailwind for the business. So from a headwind to a tailwind. So that is something people have to consider.
Even though it's a tech company, it kind of trades on margin like an auto company may. Minus those credits, it beat margin by quite a bit. The estimate was 16.3. The actual was over 17%. What does that tell you about this company going forward? Does that also settle some of these thoughts that Elon Musk is distracted? We've seen him on the campaign trail. We know he has other enterprises. Does this settle this in the mind of investors, at least in the near term?
Cool building.
At least in the near term. What the company has said, what Elon Musk has said consistently, is that their competitive advantage will be manufacturing, the machines that build the machine. And they continue to show time and time again that they're able to lower the costs of production and be the only or one of the only companies in the world that can make money in electric vehicles. So this is a consistent story behind Tesla. Their cars are great, but what they really have mastered is the ability to make them. And that showed up last quarter.
Let's talk about the broader sector right now on two different angles here. Number one, EV stocks, they're up right now. We're seeing Lucid's up, Rivian's up, but the Chinese EV makers, they're also up. At the same time, we're seeing Lyft and Uber down. I believe that's tied.
That's literally only because Tesla's stock price is up so much that it's going to pull the whole anything that's in relation to EV stocks all up, because it's like a ridiculous move here today. So don't get all hyped about the other EV players just because Tesla's bringing up the whole sector. Because you got to understand, Tesla trades in a lot of baskets with the other EV stocks and solar companies and things like that. So if Tesla the biggest weight, likely by a mile, in those sort of ETFs and whatnot. If that's up huge, it's going to bring everything up in a very substantial way.
Some of the robotaxi announcements they made during the call. Just kind of give us some color on both of those, how you see Tesla influencing both the EV market and also the ride-hailing market.
Sure. So over the last several quarters, people have been concerned that the EV market has slowed down, and that's fair because it has. But we actually put out a couple of interesting notes about what's happening in China. In China, ICE vehicles, traditional internal combustion engine vehicles, those sales have collapsed in 2024, and EVs are actually doing well. We think that's a sign of things to come for the Western world as EVs continually proliferate. So that's the first thing. The second thing on autonomy, look, we're massive believers in autonomy. We think the future of mobility is autonomous. We agree with Elon Musk. We disagree with some of his timelines. So he was out there yesterday reaffirming that the Cybercab will begin production in 2026 and traditional Tesla vehicles will be able to operate autonomously starting next year. That's put pressure on some of the ride-hailing stocks. But we're big believers in both electrification and autonomy, and those are the two areas where Tesla is focusing a lot in the near to medium term.
George, very quickly, we got to get out of here, but I got to correct myself. When I looked earlier, Li Auto, Xpeng, they were up. Now we've seen they reversed. They're in the red. These Tesla results, is this putting pressure on their business now?
Look, what we've seen consistently from China over the last, call it 9 to 10 months, is that EV sales are picking up and ICE sales have collapsed. So the future is electric. The difference, though, between Tesla and many of its Chinese competitors is Tesla can make money. And ultimately, for long-term staying power, that's obviously very important. So Tesla has proven it can not only grow and make a really good product, but they can do it at a price and with a manufacturing that consistently makes profit. So that's the difference between Tesla and some of its Chinese competitors.
That reminds me a little bit of Apple. I remember seeing a study that was done. This is years ago now. It might be 5 years ago or something like that. But essentially, Apple made 110% of the profits of the EV industry. You might think, well, how the heck is that even possible, right? Well, because so many of the ones that sell, not EVs, smartphones, so many of them lose money. And so because Apple makes so much money, right, and others lose money, they were making like over 100% of the profits they had estimated, which is just like ridiculous to think about, right? So, it sounds like that's how the EV industry is. Like no one makes money really, except Tesla. Like Tesla's really the king. I have heard things like BYD might make money, and maybe one other Chinese company, but that might be from other things outside of just selling EVs. But the moral of the story is, the bottom line is, nobody in North America, none of the North American manufacturers, none of the European manufacturers make any money from EVs. They lose a fortune. Every EV they sell, they lose a fortune. It's like ridiculous sums of money, right? Some of them, they're losing like $10,000 plus per vehicle sold when it's an EV. It's insane. The story with Tesla earnings is gross margins.
Tech. I know you're going to want to talk about Palantir eventually, but let's talk about Tesla because those numbers are out now. Revenues are light, but hey, earnings What matters more here?
I mean, the whole story is about gross margins. I mean, that's really been the headwind on Tesla stock. I'd say 30 to 48 hours of a headwind to the stock. You saw gross margins. I mean, this is a blowout. Not even us thought that we could see a gross margin, but essentially anywhere from a 200 to 300 bit beat. This shows price cuts now under control. Margins start to tick back up. You start to get now toward 20% gross margins. I think this is the start of the stock. Ultimately, this will have a 3 in front of it as a stock as the gross margins start to trend up, and as well as growth into next year from a delivery perspective.
So does the robo-taxi stuff matter?
Look, I think longer term, we think the longer term story here is autonomous, is robotics, is essentially the...
I'm up $58,000 on my Tesla shares in the public account today. I will take that. Thank you very much.
AI play. Street, what they needed to see here, show me margins. You cannot have margins going toward 13, 14%. Now that margins are starting to level off, that is so important, not just from a cash flow perspective, but showing the worst is in the rearview mirror. And when you think about all the bears and all the negatives, it comes down to deliveries will start to uptick. China, I think, is a source of strength in the quarter. But that gross margin, it's a Goldilocks for any bear. Okay, it's a Goldilocks for any bull. The bears, it's kind of a nightmare for, because that was ultimately the core of the story.
Yeah, to your point, free cash flow, $2.74 billion. That trounced expectations for Q3. But some of the details we're getting here on the outlook, I think, are also really notable. They're basically saying, despite the ongoing macroeconomic conditions, we expect to achieve slight growth in vehicle deliveries in 2024. Also talking about energy storage deployments that are going to more than double this year. But perhaps this is most notable because I know you've written about this, saying plans for new vehicles, including more affordable models, remain on track for start of production in the first half of 2025. What should we take away from that when I know a lot of folks have been looking for a sub $30,000 vehicle? We're even expecting to get some details on that at the robotaxi event, which maybe was unrealistic.
The linchpin to the story from a growth is a sub 30K vehicle. And I believe that hits by middle of 2025. That's the growth. I mean, that's ultimately, you're talking about like single digit growth this year. That's how you get to 10, 12, 15% type growth. Margins under control. That's what the bulls want to see. And I think the fact that they actually doubled down on it, and I expect clearly on the conference call, they'll focus not just on margins, but more details around that vehicle. Look, Robotaxi Day, we could argue, many would say that they're disappointed. I believe ultimately that shows the vision, the autonomous and the AI vision. Street need to ultimately see, stop talking the talk, walk the walk, show the margins, they did it. And Musk really has, I think, stepped up in that capacity.
In what's been a year of softness for EV demand and obviously more adoption of hybrid vehicles, for example, are we going to look at Q3 as an inflection point for that changing, especially when you look at results like this today? Or is this a Tesla-specific story as they do deploy more manufacturing techniques, more software, more AI, both internally and externally?
I think it's a combination. I mean, you had you look at GM's quarter. I mean, that was a Juan Soto-like quarter for GM. And then you look at what we've seen in terms of Tesla. I believe this is the inflection point. This right now is the start to me of what we're actually starting to see from a gross margin perspective. The renaissance of growth come back. They've essentially been in between two growth waves. Next year, you have a sub 30K vehicle. Then the autonomous and AI vision plays out. And that's, in our opinion, that's how you get to trillion and a half market cap. And right now, as we've seen, look, New York City cab drivers bearish on Tesla.
Okay.
And I think that's a good setup relative to what we see in the next 3-4 quarters.
Listen, we got to go, but quickly, Palantir, your reaction to that news?
I mean, that's huge. It just shows doubling down on Carp and Palantir on the defense side. When you think AI in the 202 area code, Palantir really owns that market. The fact that that partnership, just like Microsoft and others, we'll hear more in your interview tomorrow, that's a huge flex the muscles for Palantir and Carp.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I'll be covering Palantir very shortly for you guys here on the channel. So what do I think happens with Tesla stock from here before we get into Gene Munster? My thought is short-term stock runs to 300. When I say short-term, I'm talking over the next few weeks, over the next few months. Stock runs to 300. That's kind of my thought in regards to it. Then it flounders for a while, right? It goes up, goes down, doesn't really do anything for a while. And then we see, what happens with the new vehicle in terms of production, demand, those sorts of things, right? And then we figure out where do we make our next move. Is it a move from 300-ish range back down to 250? Or are we going from 300 to 400? If that new vehicle seems like a banger, demand seems insane there in 25, I think we're making our next run to 400 plus, and we'll take out new all-time highs at that point in time, right? Because then it's going to be like, oh my gosh, Tesla's back to the big, huge growth days. Margins are exploding for the company. We're close to robotaxi. Maybe they get it launched in a market, right? And then all of a sudden, like the whole story is just crazy at that point in time. So we'll see. But my thought is short term it runs to 300, okay?